The first thing I remember is the way it smiled at me. Not a cat's contented twitch, but a slow, deliberate grin, teeth too even and too human for anything with fur. It was there in the corner of my vision, a dark shape outlined by the weak streetlight seeping through my curtains, and for a half second, I thought the house had learned to grin. I moved into the flat on a wet October evening, a place with plaster that sighed and floorboards that remembered other feet. The landlord handed me the keys like a warning wrapped in brass. I shrugged it off as old building theatrics and carried my life inside in boxes that smelled of cardboard and detergent. That night, between unpacking and the hum of the radiator, I noticed a poster thumbtacked to the wall behind the bookshelf. A faded horror film thing, crimson serif letters screaming "The Meows of Midnight" down the left. But the image on the right reached out through the paper. A black cat, impossibly black, its fur swallowing the light, one eye a dull human pupil, and the other a pale slit like polished bone. Its smile was the kind of wrong that makes your tongue flatten, all enamel and patient intent. I thought it was just a poster. I thought a lot of things that first week. I thought the mews I heard scraping the alley was a stray, the small knocks at my window the winter wind. I thought the smell that woke me at 3 in the morning, sweet and metallic, like pennies left too long in a closed palm, was the building settling. I thought, until the night it pressed its face to the glass and matched the angle of the painted grin with its living one. The first strange thing was sound, a soft, rhythmic chirruping that started exactly at midnight and stopped the instant I held my breath. It was not the cry of a cat, but the cadence of a throat learning to speak in halves. The second was movement, a shadow that preferred the edges of rooms, slipping where my lamp's circle of safety ended. The third, smallest and most internal, was a nausea that came after looking too long at its eyes. I felt as though something important had rearranged itself inside my head, a small gear shifting into an obscene alignment. I began to find traces, a single hair on my pillow, darker than midnight, tiny teeth marks on the wooden windowsill. The poster had not been there when I first unpacked, but somehow its tacks were new in the plaster. At dawn, the poster smelled faintly of rain and something older, the musk of a living animal that had learned to speak inside paper. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself the city made you look twice at ordinary things. I told myself I would sleep. I told myself to stop listening for the meows that never quite sounded like anything I had heard before. But when the night came and the flat folded itself into shadow, that grin waited for me like an answer I had not asked for. After the first week, the small intrusions stopped being accidents and started feeling like appointments. The midnight chirruping learned a rhythm I could predict. 3 quick notes, a pause, then a long, wet sound that ended in a laughing creak. When it started, I would freeze with my hand on the book I was pretending to read, and the house would hold its breath with me. The radiator hissed like a throat clearing. The pipes clicked secrets through the walls. The air in the flat grew thick with the copper-sweet smell that had visited me once before, and I learned to smell it before I saw anything at all. The cat stopped being a corner lurker and became something that lived in reflections. It was in my kettle when I drew the lid back, its teeth shining in the pool of water. It was in the black screen of my phone when I woke to a notification and blinked the sleep out of my eyes. A grin framed the edge of the glass, and when I lifted the phone, the grin stayed, somehow pasted to the pixels. I started taking pictures of the rooms, trying to prove the world was stable. In every photo, there was that same impossible shadow, a face that refused to hold still. Once, when I took a selfie just to make a joke, the image showed me smiling, but my mouth was right. My lips parted into a second, smaller grin on the inside of my face, and behind it, rows of tiny teeth where a voice might crawl out. Friends thought I was tired. I told them about the poster and the noises, and how the cat's eyes mirrored me like a coin, and they laughed in that soothing way people use to cover their unease. The landlord changed the subject whenever I mentioned the poster. When I asked if anyone else had put it up, he said there was no poster on the wall at all. I went home furious to prove him wrong, and the poster was there, newly pinned, the paper edges damp as if it had been pressed against wet fur. I started to wonder whether the house was playing tricks on me or I on myself. The tricks became painful. One night I woke with my wrist raw and a string of tiny, jagged teeth marks that looked too deliberate for a stray. On another night, the radio tuned itself to a static hum, and through the hiss came syllables that sounded like my childhood nickname, the one no one used anymore. It was not just sound. The voice fit into the hollows of me, as if someone were learning the architecture of my sadness. When I spoke aloud, words I hadn't meant to say slipped in between my sentences. Polite phrases, odd interrogatives, like a second tongue practicing grammar inside my throat. Time began to fracture. I would fall asleep for a minute and wake with the kettle cold and a record of events that didn't belong to me. A half-eaten sandwich, the front door unlocked, a smear of something dark on the hallway carpet. Once I found my own handwriting on a scrap of paper in the trash. 3 words repeated until the ink had bled through, Meows of Midnight. But the penmanship wasn't mine. The letters had tiny, almost human serifs, like teeth pressing into the page. It learned to mimic, too. One morning, I woke to the sound of my mother's voice calling my name from the hallway. I stumbled out, heart in my mouth, ready to collapse into the familiarity of it, and found only the poster crooked on the floor and pressed into the dust where her soles would have been, the faintest outline of paw pads. By then, the grin felt less like a threat and more like an instruction. That night, I woke to the door not only open, but the wooden edge scored with a smile, carved so precisely it might have been waiting for me to notice. The last few nights blurred into the same bad dream with different lighting. I stopped pretending the poster was only paper. I stopped pretending that scraping at my throat for air was just panic. I began to map the hours by the cat's routine. The soft estuary of noise at 1 a.m, the long, patient silence at 3, the small, ceremonial tap at the kitchen door at 4. It felt less like an animal stalking me and more like an apprenticeship I had not signed for. I decided to end it. I told myself, out loud to the empty room, that I would remove the poster, burn it, whatever it took. The next midnight, I sat under the lamp with the poster pinned to the floor and a box cutter in my hand. The light flared on the blades of my nerves. The smell arrived first, sweet and old, pennies and rain and the damp of animal fur. Then there was a pressure at the back of my jaw, a small exhalation that was not mine. The house seemed to hold its breath with me, and the poster's grin widened as if the paper itself had learned to enjoy suspense. When I cut the paper, the blade snagged. The fibers resisted like something living. I pried the poster from the wall, and a sound came out of it, an elongating purr that pressed into my sternum and rearranged my ribs. For a second, the world made a ridiculous, perfect sense. The cat had been learning to make a doorway, the poster an invitation. I shoved the ripped poster into the trash bin, lit a match, and watched the edges curl. The teeth in the image glowed and then went black with smoke. The flame guttered the way a throat will when trying to hide a gasp. I thought it was over until I tasted it. A metallic tang on my tongue, like someone else's saliva. My mouth tasted like the poster. I ran to the bathroom and switched on the light. The mirror showed me pale and exhausted, pupils split like narrow coins, and behind my teeth, where flesh normally lived, something bright and deliberate smiled back. It was the same smile as on the poster, arranged with a patience that felt like instruction. Panic and pride are close cousins. I felt both. I pressed my palm to my mouth to stop whatever was coming, but my fingers curled around something wet, furred even, and a soft, parodying laugh bubbled up from the back of my throat. The laugh was mine and not mine. It sounded like a recording of me with the edges melted. I tried to claw it back, tried to remember how my jaw had moved before the nights of listening, but muscle does what it learns. The grin knew the angles of my face now, the small indentations where my teeth met. It practiced in me while I slept, and by morning the practice had become punctuation. I left a note on the front door, a limp attempt at warning. Do not stay. The neighbor found it the next day and asked whether I was being dramatic. I laughed. The sound I made was a wet, precise meow, clipped into 3 notes, and I watched her smile settle into confusion. For a moment, I almost loved the cleverness of it, how natural it felt to be the thing that could make people tilt their heads and listen. When the flat went quiet, the grin worked. It unlatched my tongue and taught it to shape new words. I woke one dawn with the taste of paper in my mouth and the clear sense that something had moved in beneath my skin and set up a life. The final act was a small, exact thing. I opened my mouth to call for help and found the sound that left me was not my voice, but the cat's. It had learned my vowels, my inflections, the private rhythm of my name. I do not know where I end and the smile begins. It answers when I say my own name.
Subscribe to more story books.